Today we're going to be working on this kind of super like throwback 80s look, lots of volume, lots of texture, key shape of the moment. We're working with some heavier fringe, some heavier lengths right now. So we just put together 2 or 3 techniques and a styling technique that is able to like incorporate all of these things to a feeling, and then you can adjust lengths as necessary to get these flicks and these bobs and these lob length almost like at that clavicle. So we're going to start off by establishing a 1 length, pretty heavy. You will give it a little bit of air, a little bit of breathing with the negative space. Come back in with like a super heavy shattered forward graduation there. The super low box layering, almost at shape fall. Just real visual, get the connection, get that volume, finish it off with some Zulu Knots on the top. That's gonna allow us to achieve this super 80s throwback feel. Everything that's happening at the moment, a base, like a foundation of haircutting techniques put together for a shape, for a look, and a finish on top of it. Pull that hair down and establish like a quick 1 length line on this haircut. Just keeping it pretty square and then loosening it up as needed. Just working with the natural texture of the hair there. And notice I'm staying like really loose with my sectioning. One of the things that I'm trying to get away from, stop combing everything so flat and perfect. You're basically killing the style out of the shape at all times. Just everything gets clipped loose. I comb it loose. I'm working with the natural shape that I'm given. One more time, one more pass. Elevate a little bit if I want some softness. That's just kind of to your druthers and like what the shape you want, how heavy or loose you want that bottom length, and just kind of establish that 1 length in there. Just walking that 1 length line all the way forward. Working as loose as possible with the hair, but still establishing shape. And then that last section, let's drop it. All right, we're just gonna move forward into the fringe. We're gonna do about an inch and a half deep halo section here, going to the top back of the ear, giving us the full hair here around the front. So we don't have such a thin section that have a skip here where we have to guess between the lengths. We're actually going to have a full connection there with our cut. All right, we're going to pull out and we're going to elevate slightly. We're just going to kind of establish where we want that weight. Because we're going to cut it all in the front at one time, we're going to be a little weightier here when we drop it. It's going to be a little bit ledgy and then come out. So we're going to elevate to connect it for soft. First pass is going to be take some weight out of those lengths, and my second pass is going to be establishing that line. Elevating up, first pass, softening those ends, getting some negative space in there, and then blending out to the end. So this is going to do 2 things. We're going to get a little bit more weight at the entrance point. We're going to get a little more weight in that corner. Taking that next section, it's going to be the middle of that forward grad. Putting that negative space in first, and then coming through, and then the softness of that forward graduation. Just continuing it. We don't want it to be too perfect. The whole point of this is it's supposed to be loose. Dropping that last section, and just checking to make sure if any of that is actually going to be in the bangs. In this case, it is not. That last section of the bang didn't really come into play, so it's going to be layering. And now we're going to drop this hair and just kind of layer off. We're going to be almost box layered, right? But I'm going to kind of invert it slightly to get to the bottoms. And then we're just going to basically comb that hair down almost just above shape fall. And then we're going to just kind of edge off that bottom. And that's going to get me like a nice super layered look right on the bottom that I don't have to manipulate too much. It gets the final cut almost right away. And if this was thicker, I would go in and put some negative space here. It's kind of fine enough. So we're just gonna use the slight elevation for softness. That's all we need, just above where its shape fall is, which is going to give us a pretty strong exterior, which is a great shape for almost all of our daily looks in the salon. Just establishing right above it. You know the whole connection's there. You see it. Entrance point, mid, kind of coming out to the exit point, and then the exit point of the weight line of the layering into the one link. That gives us the whole shape, and if you look at it from a profile, you really understand what I'm talking about. And then here's where we can kind of, if it's finer, we might invert back a little bit. If it's thicker, we're probably just gonna come down with verticals or really steep diagonal forward verticals. So once again, just kind of surfacing that off. And I'm gonna be very cognizant of how much weight I have on that side. And I don't want to go too crazy because I don't want to mess up any of that forward graduation that I put in. So same thing on this side. Pulling that hair down, working really loose with that texture, and just kind of walking that layering down the shaft. Now right here on someone finer, you could invert this whole first section and come back and make sure that you're keeping the weight. In this case, I'm just going to keep working through vertical, come down, and just really surface this. I'm not going to cut too deep into that. Just make sure that there's layering the whole way down. That way I don't take away from our forward graduation. So that's the haircut. You can almost style this haircut with your hands. You can kind of hand style it and diffuse it into place, or you can just kind of crimp the ends and then diffuse or blow dry, or just keep touching it until it's styled. Today we're gonna Zulu knot it, kind of give it that massive volume, massive texture of the 80s. Okay, we're gonna brush this section up. It's a top section. Depending on how much volume or where you want the volume is how high or low you'll set this. So pulling this bang section up kind of is gonna be our fringe, right? We want pretty good volume up here at the top. So we're gonna set this pretty tight to the top back to give us the most volume. We wanna be sort of loose with our twisting, because otherwise it will never dry. So you want to be like pretty loose with your knot, but then get that in there right on top of that base that you want and that volume that you want. Rubber band that off, leaving a little bit of the ends out so they'll like get, so they won't be so perfectly ringleted or anything weird. So then working on the sides, same thing. Fingering that hair up into position or combing it with like a vent brush up the head so we can set it as high as possible and get some volume out of it. And this mannequin doesn't have a ton of hair. This is actually easier on real people. Setting that really quickly in that Zulu. Repeating the process on the right side here. Have an apprentice, a good spot to put these is right on your finger so you have them at your, if you just wanted this volume to be off to the side, right? You just wanted a little volume on the side, you could split the front into two sections instead of a third. And the same with the back. If you just didn't want a ton of volume up top, you could separate this where you weren't really putting that volume in. You could kind of put these Zulu knots a little lower. In my opinion, it kind of defeats the purpose of the volume you're trying to achieve and the look you're trying to achieve, but if it's super long hair, it could make sense for sure. Same thing, I'm kind of electing to go pretty high and set that in with the band. Separating that bottom out. I'm gonna go about mid on this. I don't want this to be like too crazy big, so let's go mid. All right, so those are our Zulu knots. We're gonna dry these off. You're gonna use sock dryer, diffuser, air dry. You could use a hood dryer. Each one of these will give you slight variations on it. I'm probably gonna dry this just by hand with just the open nozzle. A sock diffuser would be really good here. You can do whatever you want. Just make sure that they're all the way dry before you pull them out. If they're too damp at all, it'll ruin the set. So make sure it's most of the way dry, if not way past dry. You can tell I get pretty mean with these knots as I'm drying, because you want to make sure that you get in there and get it dry. These sets were meant for like much longer, much thicker hairs. I mean, you can do them on anything, but works better on that. All right, so that's it. You just kind of finger it into place. If you want to know how the 80s happened in a nutshell, there it is. Take a little mousse, add a little powder, get it in there at that root, and kind of help set it a little bit. Let's take that mousse and hand style it into place. Let it dance. Let the hairstyle speak for itself.